All right, the Hangout is live. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I am Christiana Ellis.
And I'm Mike Mateen.
Tonight, we are continuing our journey to see as many of the 2018 Oscar-nominated films as possible before the awards are given out. Our last installment here went through sort of the first half of the Oscar nominations themselves, and then we had to cut a little bit short last time. So tonight, we're going to just finish going over the categories at a high level, but then we're going to start to deep dive some of the movies that we have each seen in common. And so that may involve spoilers. So if you're watching live, we will certainly let you know which movie we're about to talk about before we talk about it. And then what I'll probably do in the podcast notes, the video notes, once it's recorded, is I'll put the little start and stop times about when we talk about each movie. So if you want to avoid spoilers for one, but hear the discussion for another, you'll be able to do that. But
sounds good.
Yeah. So when last we had this discussion, we had just finished reading the nominees for production design, which means that the next category to read, to just briefly discuss, is best cinematography. Would you like to read the nominees for that one?
Yes. So we have Blade Runner 2049, Darkest Hour, Dunkirk, Mudbound, and The Shape of Water.
Mm-hmm.
And we did have Best Blade Runner on there for Best Production Design, so there are no new movies in this category.
No, although there are a couple that we have seen since then, but we'll talk about them in greater detail later.
Yes, but there's nothing. Nothing new. No new nominees based on this.
Right. So go ahead and move on, or rather, I think the one thing I wanted to I remember to call out is that I believe the cinematographer for Mudbound may be the first female cinematographer to be nominated.
Interesting.
For this award. I don't remember the details. I don't have the article up, so I don't actually have it fresh. But I believe I read that. But the next category is Best Costume Design, and the nominees are Beauty and the Beast, Darkest Hour, Phantom Thread, The Shape of Water, and Victoria and Abdul, which that is the only new one for this category. It's the first nomination for that movie, which I believe that I've seen a poster for it. Like I feel like I know vaguely what it is.
I'm not sure I know what it is at all.
I believe, based on very sketchy information, it is about Queen Victoria and deals with some of Britain's colonialism stuff going on in India. And so Abdul is an Indian youth, I believe, that is a friend or something of Queen Victoria. I believe that is what that movie is about.
Got it.
But at least from the poster, I would guess that the tone is light. Like it's not a serious historical drama as much as it is, hey, look, let's humanize some of these historical figures and also maybe gently poke at what may be a sore spot for some people.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay, so next.
So best makeup and hairstyling, Darkest Hour, Victoria and Abdul, and Wonder, which I believe is the only nomination for this.
That's correct, and I actually have no idea what it is. I don't know anything about that one.
I don't either. I wouldn't call this. This one is interesting that they only have 3 in here. I don't know I can't remember if that's typical.
I feel like this category usually only has 3, and that's something we've discussed in previous years. Is usually the number of nominees is partially reflective of how many submitted movies there were. And I think it's just that typically the number of movies that submit for the best makeup and hairstyling award is fewer, and that's why they have fewer nominees. I believe that would be the official explanation, but I'm sure there's a momentum aspect too, because I'm pretty sure this has been only 3 nominees in this category for a long time.
Okay. Yeah, because it surprised me. I know it's a different kind of makeup, but is The Shape of Water, is that, I mean, it's not really makeup, I guess. That's
well, there's prosthetics and so on.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. That's why I kind of thought that was.
And also, the dealing with our agent's injury and just.
Well, yeah. Some of the special effects not just the agent's injury, but also the Russian's injury, and there's a couple of injuries in there that are notably.
Right, but I would imagine that the highlight, though, is Doug Jones in his Fishman outfit.
Yes, exactly, so I thought that was interesting that wasn't on here. I felt like The Greatest Showman had pretty good. There was sort of I think the makeup and hair was interesting in that, and that everyone had a unique look. So again, not that they're snubs or by any means. It was just interesting that those, which I thought did well for me in this category, weren't even on here, but they have issues yet.
Yeah. So the only one that I kind of feel like I get the nomination is just Darkest Hour. Seems to have a transformation of Gary Oldman into Winston Churchill.
Right.
Transformation makes it sound like a werewolf movie. Okay, so best documentary feature. The nominees are Abacus, Small Enough to Jail, Faces, Places, Icarus, Last Men in Aleppo, and Strong Island. And so first nomination, obviously, for all of these because they're only in this category. I have seen Icarus, which was not true when we originally met, but I've seen it since. It is on Netflix along with a couple of others of these. I believe actually Last Men in Aleppo and Strong Island are also on Netflix.
Correct.
Icarus is about, it starts off as a little bit like a Super Size Me type experiment where a guy who had gotten into cycling, not at a professional level, but as a, talented amateur, inspired by Lance Armstrong, and who sort of was emotionally affected by the news about Lance Armstrong's doping, decides that he kind of wants to understand better and document what sort of process you would need to go through to gain benefits from doping, but not get caught. Like, what does it take to have your medicines and your workouts and everything scheduled so precisely to allow you to pass drug tests while still gaining the benefit of the drugs? And in his efforts to do this, obviously there's a limited number of doctors who are going to have the know-how to help him do that, right? And so in pursuing that information, he ends up making contact with a guy who is right in the middle of the whole controversy with Russia's government doping program, right as all that's blowing up. And so that's what the movie is kind of about. And it's actually, it's very good. I recommend it.
So is the experimenter Icarus in this scenario, or is the other doctor?
The guy he kind of contacts is definitely Icarus, although it kind of applies in a couple of ways.
Got it.
Honestly, the Icarus theme is not as strong in it as some others, so I'm kind of not sure why that's necessarily the obvious title for it, but meaning there's a lot of 1984 related themes and stuff, so I almost feel like might have made more sense to name it after that, but I don't know. It's not a major concern.
No, it works. Mm-hmm. All right, so on to best sound mixing. Mm-hmm. And we've got Baby Driver, Blade Runner 2049, Dunkirk, The Shape of Water, and Star Wars The Last Jedi.
I've seen all 5. Yay!
I'm thrilled that Baby Driver is on here.
Yeah.
I think that it has the most. I don't want to say the most unique because things can't be the most unique. It has the most
stylized.
Yeah, the most style of the sound mixing. I'm super thrilled that it's on here. I don't think that it's going to win. Just it's atypical for this category, but it is neat. It is a neat movie from that perspective.
I wouldn't be surprised to see it maybe win either this one or editing, just because it's kind of the only stuff. Like, it's also nominated for film editing, but I think it's even less likely to win that one. Even though it's kind of all part and parcel, because of what makes that movie so good is really tied up in kind of those things, right? It's the editing of all of it together in kind of a very special way, which we'll talk more about later. But yeah, I would like to see it win at least something, just because it was great. And certainly a lot of that is, if it was going to be nominated for anything, it's in the right categories.
Yes, and I'm hoping just that, it's not clouded by Kevin Spacey inclusion, and that, it.
Yeah,
they'll never say that it doesn't win because of that if it doesn't win something, but it would be a shame if that did end up affecting it. We'll never know, of course. But.
Right. No one would ever say, but that is just sort of an unfortunate thing that all kind of came out after the movie came out. And
I mean, it's unfortunate that he behaved in the way that he did to.
Well, obviously, yeah. I just mean, yeah. But it's not like All the Money in the World where it wasn't out yet, and they had the opportunity to go
fix it, right? And like House of Cards, where they can,
which was between seasons, and
between seasons, and they can write it out, yeah.
Yeah, but Baby Driver is like, nope, has just been out for a few months, and we're building up towards our home release.
Yep. So.
Yeah.
At least he's a bad guy.
Sort of. It's complicated, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But anyway.
He's a bad guy for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, the only other new movie to come up in this nomination so far is Star Wars: Last Jedi. A predictable nomination, just because lots of the big science fiction epics and so on often get put in these categories, like with visual effects. The thing that strikes me actually the most, without getting into too much detail, is the most obvious sound moment from Last Jedi is actually a moment where there's no sound at all, but in like an impactful way. That, I mean, anyone who's seen it will know exactly the moment I'm talking about. And I'll just leave it there, because anyone who hasn't seen it yet won't know. And then when it hits you, you'll say, oh, yeah, that was it. But that was certainly a creative choice to go completely silent there. And it really works. So there's something to that. Plus, lightsaber sounds, blaster sounds.
That gets us into best visual effects. So Blade Runner.
Well, we kind of best sound editing versus best sound mixing. We always talk a little bit about how it's often hard to distinguish as a moviegoer the difference between those two. But in this case, it's even more dramatic because it's literally the same 5 movies.
True.
So we didn't read it, but it is the same 5 movies as sound mixing. But yes, go ahead. Best visual effects.
Best visual effects is Blade Runner, Guardians of the Galaxy 2, Kong 2,
Kong Skull Island. You got it's because it's not canonically a sequel to King Kong.
So yeah, not Kong 2, Kong Skull Island, Star Wars: Last Jedi, and War for the Planet of the Apes. So literally all sequels, even if they are not canonically sequels, they are all.
Well, Kong Skull Island is, I think that it got written off as feeling like kind of a cheap sequel or something like that to a lot of people, including myself when it was in the theater. But I saw it on Blu-ray. It's actually a lot of fun. I really recommend it, and it's more of the first story in a new sort of universe that I don't know if they're actually going to make any more of or not. But it's actually a lot of fun. I recommend it if you're looking for a big dumb monster movie. It's great.
Awesome. And so the funniest thing about this category is I'm actually not sure if I've seen War for the Planet of the Apes. That's how unimpactful this set of 8 movies has been. Is I'm not sure which I've seen, which I have not.
Well, yeah.
I mean, the kind of thing I watch on planes and stuff. So I'm not really. I think I might have seen this.
Well, yeah, like
rewatch it.
I definitely haven't seen this one, which is the third one. Yeah. But part of the reason I didn't see it is because the second one was it felt basically like a movie that has a lot of things that are very skillfully done, telling a story that ultimately didn't really move me very much. And so the trailer for the new one is like, it's more of that. And I'm like,
well, exactly. Okay, that's why I'm not sure if I've only seen the second one.
Yeah.
And this is just more of that, or if I have actually seen this movie. Yeah. I literally don't know. Mm-hmm. In fact, I may rewatch it and still not know if I've seen
it. Yeah. This is also the only nomination for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, which I loved. It's great. It's got the effects that you would expect. I mean, it's a big sci-fi movie with tons of aliens and spaceships and living planets and warps and all that good stuff. So, I mean, it's got everything you would expect in that regard. But it's also kind of like it is part of that whole Marvel pantheon. So, it's one of those, again, that kind of, it depends more on having seen the previous one than I really think. Well, I don't know, maybe Star Wars. I was going to say the others, you don't, like Kong Skull Island, you don't have to have seen any other movie. Blade Runner 2049 obviously follows up on Blade Runner, but it's so disconnected in a lot of ways that I really feel like it could stand alone more than some of the others. But anyway, yeah, so that's, I really like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, but that's one of the movies where you kind of, you know whether you're interested in seeing that or not. And if you are, then it's probably going to be good. And if you're not, then what are we talking about? So the last category then is Best Film Editing. And here we have Baby Driver, Dunkirk, I, Tonya, The Shape of Water, and 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. And all of those are, there's no new titles in that one. But I think I, Tonya is maybe the one that surprised people, just in the sense that it's, unlike the other 4, it's not one of the Best Picture nominees.
Right.
But,
Baby Driver's not.
Oh, you're right. You're right. You're right.
That'd be cool if it was, but
I think maybe just because I've seen Baby Driver and I know the editing is amazing, maybe that's why I kind of took it as a given to me.
Yes.
In my head,
a lot of good things about I, Tonya. So I mean, obviously,
I have too. I'm interested to see it, and just one additional little connection that has no real personal meaning, but Critical Role, which is a popular online Dungeons and Dragons video /show, has one of the players named Sam Riegel. I am fond of, as in a fan, and apparently his sister was one of the people nominated for the editing in I, Tonya. So
that's cool.
Trivia more than anything else. But yeah, so that's all of the nominations. And we have our spreadsheet that I've posted notes or posted link to. So if you want to check out this spreadsheet and follow along as Mike and I mark off what we've seen and what we haven't and get to our percentages. And see as we go. So there's which ones have you seen since we last recorded?
Oh,
I mean, I can see them, but you can just.
I remember. I can't remember if Dunkirk was before or after we recorded. It was right around the same time.
I think it was shortly after. So.
Okay. The Shape of Water I definitely saw after we recorded. The Post I saw after we recorded. And felt like I saw, maybe I didn't see anything else just because those were all pretty impactful and
those
good.
Were, yeah, multiple nominations. Well, The Post actually only has 2.
I know, but it's a Best Picture, so.
Yeah.
And it was also one that my wife was very interested in seeing, so we got to go actually see it together, which was always pleasant to do that. I think that's it that I've seen since.
Okay.
Not that's still like 4 or 3, but yeah.
So what I've seen since the original recording, I've now seen Dunkirk, Lady Bird, Phantom Thread, and The Post. Also, let's see, there was the Beauty and the Beast, and Icarus. Those are the ones that I have seen since we originally recorded. But that means that there are several that overlap there. So so we have some that we can do our sort of deep dive discussions. And do you want to just kind of go down the list there?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's probably the easiest way to do it.
Sure. Okay, so that would be first up, Dunkirk, which we have now both seen. And so, as mentioned at the beginning of the show, if you are worried about spoilers, we're not going to go out of our way to discuss every little twist necessarily, but, spoiler warning for Dunkirk. And if you want to sort of, I don't know, I'm just trying to think if there's an easy way to... No, I don't think there's an easy way to do it live, but I can put a little sign on the video that says what movie we're discussing, which maybe I'll do once it's posted. But Dunkirk.
So, at least it's funny that you went through that whole like spoiler disclaimer thing. When for me, this was like there are no spoilers to this movie. This movie is exactly what it was, described as, what the trailer looked like.
I mean, you could worry about the fates of individual characters, perhaps, but...
Yeah. Well, yeah, like Tom Hardy dies. That's a spoiler, I guess.
Does he? He's taken prisoner at the end.
Oh, yeah, taken prisoner. Sorry. Wrong. Well... So I guess that actually speaks to exactly how I felt about this movie, is that it never fully engaged me.
Yeah.
It is, I mean, for all of the craftsmanship Oscars that it's nominated for, it absolutely is that. It is, it has sweeping visuals. It's, the acting in this, all the scenes are well delivered. It just doesn't weave a story for me that, even just from the beginning, it just never, I kept waiting for it to start, and it never really did. It like kept just sort of moving along in what never felt like something that, again, it all felt like it was all a precursor to me, because I never really latched on. And so that's, it's funny that, like, even at the end, like, I forgot that, yeah, his plane landed and he got captured. But I think my dog is breaking in. Hello. You want to podcast?
I kind of agree. The sort of the one sentence version that I came up with in my head after watching it was that it was a skillfully made story that I didn't like very much. And I think part of that was just down to, like, even just sitting down to watch it, I was having a hard time feeling excited about watching a tense World War II war movie. I wasn't feeling it. Like I was kind of making myself watch it to watch it, which is not the best attitude to go into a movie with, to be fair. So I'll take that on, that was on me. But at the same time, I just
anything. It doesn't create anything to not set that up, you know?
Well, the thing is, like, the movie, to my mind, never made a case for itself in the sense of why tell this story?
That's a great way to put it.
Because it's skillfully told. Like the production and the look of everything and the tension, and lots of people have talked about this idea of intercutting these three stories, the one that takes a week, one that takes a day, one that takes an hour, and having these little places where they cross over each other that build tension in the respective stories is kind of interesting. So there's nothing specific about it that's like a bad decision, so much as it just felt like, why tell this story? And it never really kind of made that case for itself for me.
No, and it's interesting because I started to watch it, one evening that I had rented it, but something came up and I had to, stop like literally like 10 minutes in and start over. And I felt like when I was getting ready to watch it the second time, I was like, that opening really, it felt super like disjointed. Like it just didn't, it felt like it just kind of started in the middle of the movie and it wasn't that interesting of a movie. And I was like, well, maybe that's just because I had to abandon it early and it just didn't like come together right. And it literally, as I watched it again for the second time, like the next evening, it was the same way. Like it just sort of drops you in, which could be okay, but I just never got my footing. And then like 2 hours later, I'm like at the end of the movie.
It takes a while to explain what the actual stakes are. For example, one of the soldiers trying to escape off the beach, that storyline, like our introduction to that is we have this guy and some of his buddies running through this city, getting shot at. All of them get killed except the one guy. And then he finally manages to almost get shot by presumably French soldiers who have like a little barricade. They let him through, and he runs out to the beach where we see just thousands and thousands of soldiers just standing on the beach. And my first thought there, like even given the history, just my visceral response was, what the fuck are they doing? There's just, they couldn't be helping those guys with the barricade? Like, what? They're just all standing there. All of their guns are just, leaned against a little wall, just all lined up. And I'm just thinking, yeah, okay, they're evacuating, but they're just standing on the beach waiting to get shot by fighters when they could be helping.
Yeah.
And like, there's even a big moment later on where like the admiral or whatever his name, Kenneth Branagh, makes a big point of he's staying behind to help the French. And I'm like,
you haven't been helping the French yet.
I know. Like, what are you going to do?
Yeah. You had
to walk up to the barricade and say, give me one of those rifles and I'll put on a helmet instead of my fancy admiral hat. And I'm like, yeah. So there's a few things like that are play a little weird. And I will say that the movie does eventually get to a point where it ramps up the tension fairly well, in the sense that there is tension and suspense, but I felt like I watched a lot of the movie with kind of a headache and a stomach ache, just feeling like this is not fun. Like, to the extent that I care, I kind of just want this to stop. Like, not the movie, but like the feeling that the movie produces, that it evokes deliberately in the viewer is, this is awful. I want this to stop.
Yeah, it's very disorienting on purpose.
Yeah. So
like even that scene where he's like running through the streets, like it's just such a weird, it's just that that's part of the opening that really just kind of left me as like odd. Is it doesn't explain, like you said, it's like, what's he trying to get to? When he gets there, you're like, well, I don't understand. Like, there's this fighting like literally right there, but then these guys are all just chilling, waiting to get like their work's done. And but even just the whole scene of them running through the streets, like it's all just very. It's meant to be disorienting. It's meant to be somewhat jarring. It's not explaining it on purpose so that you are watching it with a kind of a like, what's happening? I don't understand this feeling. And it, like I said, it looks beautiful, and the performances within the individual scenes. I mean, Kenneth Branagh is great as the Admiral. I mean, he has these very interesting moments, and even those ones that you point out as kind of silly, but like it feels very real within the story of, he cares so much about what he's doing that he's going to go back and help, and now that he's done this duty of getting these guys out, which was his main job. Now he's going to go help the French, and Tom Hardy's obviously amazing at everything that he's in.
The to the extent that it's kind of a fancy trick to intercut these three stories that are moving at different relative speeds. I mean, it's kind of flashy, but it obscures to some extent. Yeah, it obscures to some extent, though. First of all, it means that we keep having to process of like, oh, he just flew over a boat that was approaching his buddies down plane. Is that the boat that's in the other storyline? I'm not sure. It looks like it might be, but that's not where the boat is when we cut to the boat. And it turns out that that does happen later in that boat's storyline. We find that, we see that happen. And so it feels clever, but it mostly just has us trying to like puzzle out the details instead of having us in the scene.
Yeah.
And I think
that's part of where the disorientation comes as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Christopher Nolan has often, been criticized, I think, for having sort of an emotional distance in his movies. Like even when he's telling the story of someone having a very personal, emotional issue, there's a little bit of a style where it's still kind of kept at arm's length. We're watching, but not taking part. And I don't think that's always true of his movies, but it's a criticism that I've heard before. But this one, that distance plus the flashiness of the intercutting kind of obscures the fact that all three of these storylines are really just this happens, and then 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 the movie's over. There's no structure to it beyond the flashy spectacle of cutting in between the storylines.
Yes.
So, yeah, anyway, I don't know that I have a lot else to say about it.
No, I mean, that's really all I have to say about it, too. I mean, that's kind of...
Yeah. And to a large extent, that's kind of what I had heard about it, back when it was in the theater, which is why I hadn't gone to see it in the theater.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that it's going to win any of the awards, but the only one that I would really feel comfortable with, just based on what I've seen so far and what I know of the other movies, would be the cinematography. I think that it is... I mean, I thought it was a really, really beautifully shot movie.
Yeah.
The rest of the pieces, I think we've covered all the rest of it. And I'm not saying that it should win that. I'm saying if it was going to win an award, that's the one I feel most comfortable with.
Right. Like there's some where I feel like I can say it had very good production design. But The Shape of Water is also nominated in that category. And I don't think I would say that Dunkirk has better production design than The Shape of Water. But we'll talk about that.
I think it has a different cinematography than The Shape of Water. And I don't think that it should beat The Shape of Water, but I would feel okay if it be in that category.
Right. Cinematography. I was thinking production design specifically, but so I'm agreeing with you on cinematography.
Yep. All right.
Yep. That's Dunkirk. All right. Next, Get Out. And this in particular is one that I feel like if you haven't seen it, Although if you haven't seen it by now, it might be one of those things where you're kind of desperate to actually know what it's about before you go see it. I don't know, but I feel like you could probably find out by now. But it's certainly one that if you haven't seen it, I would recommend that you not listen to the spoilers. And I'm not usually one that obsesses and thinks spoilers are a huge deal, but I think that there are certainly elements of this one that are better left as a surprise.
Yes, and if you've made it this far and you haven't seen it, I thought that I knew what the spoiler was. I didn't go out of my way to try to research it. I thought that the spoiler was, that he goes to visit his, white girlfriend's parents, and they, basically they kidnap him. And I thought that was supposed to be the spoiler, was that, he gets kidnapped. I was very wrong as to what the actual... that has happened, but the
exactly, that's what I meant.
Behind it is so much different.
The why.
What?
Yeah.
The why.
The why is unexpected.
And and it's what makes the movie so good. When I really, when I watched it, it is part of the fabric of like why this movie is important. And because of so. But anyway, yes, it's very, very good, and I'm glad to see a well-made horror movie on here, because it is more than a horror movie.
Right. Like, I think that there's kind of two ways to talk about it, right? One is just sort of strictly on the film production level, which is very great in those regards too, just in the sense of how tight the script is, how logically everything works, how effectively they use a very small number of sets and small number of characters, but still make the whole movie feel rich, and kind of claustrophobic, but in, just a very effective way. It essentially made a movie that couldn't have cost very much to make. I don't actually know the number, but I'm pretty sure it's low compared to the other movies on this list. And that's often true of horror movies, but, then the horror movies don't actually end up being kind of as meaningful. So it's skillfully made, in addition to finding a really fresh take on some tropes that we feel like it's taking the next step before we realized we were done with this step in some ways, if that makes sense. Like, in terms of, I think, the more predictable why that we mentioned, like the idea of, his girlfriend's family seem nice, but they're actually secret racists, and they're gonna just call him the N-word and be mean to him or make him a slave or something like that. Like, that would be sort of a very predictable, exploitative sort of story to tell.
Yes.
Right. But we could easily imagine that being the story, right? Like that sort of, if you're saying this is a horror movie that starts with him, this main character going to visit his white girlfriend's house, and something that makes this a horror movie is going to happen. We could imagine that being what it is, right?
Yeah.
But to have it be much more nuanced than that, because in some ways it is that, but with a whole different coat of paint that really changes the thought process of it. We talked about not wanting to, like, I don't know. I mean, we talked about that we're going to be free to give spoilers here, and I'm not necessarily going to just go plot by plot, but just the idea of having characters that probably even in their own minds believe that they are not racist, that they're like fans of Black people in a way. And yet the horror of it is that ultimately, though, it is still about not seeing them as fully human and with their own right to have their own thoughts and feelings.
Right.
It's like a fetishization.
Yes, it's a. I mean, Well, and what's important is that it's a terribly like horrible step of a kind of racism that does exist that people don't talk about a lot. You know, that there is this sort of classification of, you know, that, well, blacks are good athletes, and that doesn't make me racist because I like watching the NFL and black people are better at that, you know. And so it's touching on this really weird nerve, but also in a very, very horrific way.
Yeah.
And it's incredibly complicated to watch, but and
it lampshades all of those, you know, like those more predictable, tropey or exploitative ways that we might have imagined that the story was going to go. It lampshades all of that with his TSA buddy speculating that that's what's going on.
Right.
They're going to kidnap you and make you a sex slave. You know, and so that we get a lot of comic relief from that character. And you know, this is definitely, you know, spoiler territory, but who would have ever thought that one of the biggest cheer lines of the year would be TS motherfucking A?
Yeah. That's true.
But yeah, so we get comic relief from it, but it also lampshades the difference between the version of the story that went that direction versus the one that we're getting, which is much more nuanced and interesting and saying something that we haven't heard before.
Yeah, and there's a couple of moments like that. I mean, not just with the TSA guy, but there's the joke about, you know, I would have voted for Obama for a third term, you know, that she uses as like oh, it's okay, like, don't worry about visiting my parents. You know, my dad loved Obama. He would have voted for him for a third term. Yeah. And then he talks about that, like that's his like opening line, like, you know, to relate to the black guy. And at first, like when you're first watching the movie, you sort of know that this isn't going to go well for him. Obviously, it's a horror movie. You're thinking that that's like sort of their like go to, oh, this is how I show that I'm not racist when I really am, and I'm going to you know, relate to him in this line. But the reality is, when you kind of get to the end of the movie, you realize that it was very true. Like you said, they're like fans of black people. Like he really would have voted for Obama for a third term. It's not like some trite thing he's saying. So like the humor in it is also very complex.
It's they're the kind of white people who would actually be really jazzed to show off to all of their friends that they have a black best friend now. Yeah. Won't they be impressed? But still fundamentally not. See, one thing that just occurred to me is that if there's anyone who hasn't seen it but decided to just dive in and go full spoilers with us anyway, perhaps what we should just briefly say is it turns out what the white people want to do is they have this fancy brain transference thing where when they get old, they can transfer their brain into this black person and basically take over their body.
Yes.
Erasing the person that was once there.
Healthy, athletic black people to like put their old white brains into.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they do like this whole like auction off, like very weird. Yeah.
Oh, it's super weird. But also very creepy, especially that the whole now you're in the sunken place is a line that like out of context is like, what does that mean? But like that movie hits like that line hits like a sledgehammer when it comes in the movie.
Yes.
But yeah, the other thing that I was going to think of is I saw a Twitter conversation with some people I follow, and one of them was kind of saying that they felt like they had wanted more explanation of from the immediate family, like the girlfriend and her parents wanting to know more about what was their justification to themselves for why this was okay. Because Stephen Root's character explains everything to our, Chris is the main character, right? I saw it in the theater, but it's been months, so I just wanted to double check. But Stephen Root explains it all, but for his motives are much more mercenary. He's blind. He wants to be able to see. But why does this family, like, how do they justify it to themselves? And one of the thoughts that I had about that question is we kind of can't get their explanation, because we're seeing the movie from Chris's perspective, and they would never explain it to him, because that would imply that he is an individual who deserves to know.
Right, which is
And
the
if
whole
they thought
point.
that, yeah,
is they don't see him as that is the explanation, is they don't see him as a human with rights. And there's some little touches on it. I mean, it you get the idea that the whole impetus behind this idea was about trying to save like her grandparents, his parents or her parents. I can't remember which one, whether they're maternal or paternal. I don't even know if it even.
There's also kind of a vague implication that it had been going on maybe even before that somehow, but it's left very mysterious.
Yeah, see, I took it as that was what prompted him to begin doing this, and then when his culture, like his friends group, realized that this was a thing that could be done, they started offering a lot of money for it.
Yeah,
and
you might be right. I felt like it was left kind of vague, so maybe I missed a detail there.
Well, I don't think that it made it this abundant. I don't think it was trying to draw. This is just how I interpret it. And so again, it may have been left very vague, but that was sort of the explanation that I took, is that they were mercenary to begin with, and because they wanted to save their their parents, and because they, as a group, don't see these black people as humans with rights, as you said earlier. When their friends saw what they did and they were really impressed, they said, "Oh, well, we'll pay you a ton to do that," and that started this whole like, "Oh, well, yeah, sure, we'll just keep doing that then." And
but yeah, this movie, before we finally get because there's a great build in this movie where we're definitely realizing in an increasingly intense way something really messed up is going on here, but we don't really understand what it is yet. But we're seeing people behave in ways that make it very clear something bad is happening. But the problem is just this question of, if it turns out that you're just freaking out over nothing, that would be really embarrassing. So you want to kind of keep that on the down low. But also this idea that if it is, in fact, actually really bad, letting them know that might just make them spring the trap sooner. So trying to play it cool. And we get like another one of those really crucial moments where we sort of definitively learn the alignment of one of the characters, throw me the keys. Where are the keys? There's just so many really incredibly powerful moments. The movie is just super effective. And there's all these little threads that connect in ways that didn't even really need to, like the whole bit early on at the dinner where the brother is talking about his martial arts training and how it's all about planning like 3 moves ahead, right? Well, and then how does Chris actually end up beating him at the end? He's like, "Oh, I keep trying to open the door and then he kicks it closed. I open the door, he kicks it closed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to open the door, wait for him to kick it closed, and then stab him in the thigh."
Yep.
So he plans moves ahead, just like that character talked about.
Yep.
But then, just so many great payoffs. And then the end too, just where he's basically got her down. He's like strangling her. And then we see the flashing lights and we're just thinking, oh God, the police are going to kill him because they think he's murdering a white girl. And then that's not what happens is it's like the perfect note to end the movie on, in my opinion. It's so good. It's so good.
Yeah, it really was a great. Yeah, and like you said, it's just it's so well put together for being a horror movie. I mean, it's incredible. I was really, really impressed with it.
And, I don't know that I think that it'll win. I think it's probably a little like that it got nominated is probably the Academy's nod to it. I think it's probably a little too like actually edgy for most of the Academy. But honestly, it would not hurt my feelings if it won.
No, I would be happy with that. I don't think it's like you said. I don't think it's likely, but I would not mind. It is really that good. And
right, because it's both things, right? It's a very effective, well-made horror movie, and it actually says something meaningful about our society today. It does both things simultaneously. It's chocolate and peanut butter. Not to
it's like, you know, you hear about how good it is, and you know, you get your expectations up of like, oh well, this is going to be a really good movie, and then you watch it and it delivers, and that's always it's always nice when something like that happens, you know.
Yeah, definitely. So that one's great. All right. So let me just briefly give capsule reviews of Lady Bird and Phantom Thread, although we won't talk about them in detail because we haven't both seen them. Lady Bird is pretty much exactly what you'd expect it to be if you see the trailer, which is a heartwarming coming of age story about a young girl in 2002 who has a tricky relationship with her mother, and she's trying to figure out who she wants to be and all of that stuff. And I kind of saying that because it's sort of a rote sort of thing. Like we know what that kind of movie is, and it is that, but it's a very good one. So it is emblematic of the genre. So very effective, but not really breaking new ground, if you follow me.
Yep.
Phantom Thread, what I said about it on Twitter afterwards is that it is secretly weird. And a couple of people replied to me that, like, secret? Like, like somehow they knew that it was actually weird. And I'm thinking, well, okay, maybe people had different expectations of it than I did going in. And I suppose knowing that Paul Thomas Anderson directed it would probably suggest that it's not going to be just a straight ahead period drama. But it is weirder than I expected it to be. And I would also maintain that even if you expect it to be weird, the way in which it is weird is secret. It treats it itself as a secret, meaning it's about secrets and hidden motivations and all of those sorts of things. So it treats its own weirdness as a secret within the film. And so I maintain that secretly weird is a valid description of it, regardless of whether you expected it to be weird or not. But it is. It is basically just a character study of this guy played by Daniel Day-Lewis and his sister, who so he makes dresses, fancy dresses. His sister kind of runs the business side of things. And then he meets this new woman who captivates him. And it's kind of about sort of the three of them circling each other. And what's really kind of striking about it, it's a character study of those three. And it does a really good job of constantly keeping you off balance on who you're rooting for. Like, whose emotional, eyes are you seeing the story from? Because there will be a moment where you're in the position of the new girl saying, oh, I don't know, that looks like a red flag to me. I'm not sure if I would, stick around. That's some weird behavior here. And then you're in with the sister of saying, what is this new girl? It's like she's coming in, she thinks she just gets to disrupt the whole routine just because she's, the crush of the week. And then you're with the guy of like, no, he likes things a certain way, and it's fair for him to want to live his life that way. And if someone doesn't want to be involved with that, he's not holding them prisoner. So why are they trying to force him to change? Like it's his job to do that. And you kind of feel like you keep going around in circles of like, well, who is it that I'm actually, whose side am I on? Are they actually three different sides? It's not even obvious that they are. And so that's kind of what the movie is about, so to speak. But it's very well made and it's interesting. And there's definitely some turns in the story that I did not see coming. And Yeah, so it's good, but secretly weird. All right. The next movie that we have both seen, The Post.
The Post.
You and I exchanged brief set of messages last night about it because I only just saw it yesterday. It didn't do it for me. Like, it's not bad.
Judging from that, I think our messages, I think I enjoyed it more than you did.
Yeah. And that's fine. Like, it's not that I disliked it. I would even say that I liked it more than Dunkirk, because Dunkirk kind of ultimately felt like a movie that, though well made, I didn't really enjoy. The Post, I didn't feel that way about The Post, but it just also kind of felt like, it's got Tom Hanks, it's got Meryl Streep, it's got this stellar cast directed by Spielberg, and I'm just watching it and feeling like I don't feel like this is the best work of any of these people. It's not bad. It just felt kind of paint by the numbers to me.
Yeah, it felt like they chose to tell a story based on, what the politics of the times are and sort of the, the fake news and the attack on the media from the government, trying to show why the media is important, why a free press is important, why they should challenge authority, why we don't live in a place where they should only say flattering things about the people in charge, why that's such a big deal. It definitely felt like that's the motivation behind it.
Right. And I'm on board with that motivation.
Yeah. But at the same time, it also, it didn't feel like this was like you said, it was not their best work, because I don't think it was anything that any of them were like passionate about. Like, let's tell this story. It's almost like we don't like what's going on. We want to tell a story that shows why the media is important. This is a good choice of story to do that. Let's do this one. And it just never, it didn't feel like they were all in it. Like, Spielberg has told stories like this before, with these sort of this historical, like, dramas about something that we all kind of know about, but really giving it that, fleshing it out, like Munich, but that Munich felt like it was like he really, really wanted to tell that story. This felt like they wanted to tell a story and chose this one. Am I getting like to your point?
Yeah.
Like,
oh, did I lose you? Oh, no, there you are.
Behind it. Oh. There's just no like punch behind it.
Yeah, there was a point early on where we were following Bob Odenkirk's character out to the payphones, where, like, in that moment I was feeling like, oh yeah, okay, I'm on board for this. I mean, you and I have had a conversation, I think, when we did a Few Good Men for the not A Few Good Men, the Woodward and Bernstein movie. Which one am I thinking of?
Oh, All the President's Men.
Yes, All the President's Men. That's what I meant. When we did that for Watching 100 Movies, one of the things we talked about in that discussion, I think, was how few journalism procedurals we get anymore. And then more recently, we got Spotlight, which was very good. And so I was watching that early part of this movie and just feeling like, oh yeah, like I like this. I like this. I will say that the whole opening sequence with Ellsberg in Vietnam felt very rudimentary to me. Like, I mean, I'm just watching that and I'm saying, like, did the second unit do this or something? Because, like, this is Spielberg and we're getting like a 30-second Vietnam night battle sequence that could have been any other movie ever set in Vietnam. Like, there's nothing interesting about that segment. It was like, here is every Vietnam War night shootout scene you've ever seen.
At the same time, I think that it may have been done by the second unit.
I don't know really, but
it only existed because it needed to show us that Ellsberg was in Vietnam, and not as a combatant, but as a, or whatever he was doing there.
It was he was performing a study for the Rand Corporation, I guess.
Study. That's right. He was doing a. That's right. He was doing a study there. That's right. Yeah.
But yeah, like, so there is stuff to like in the movie. I don't want to be a total downer on it, but I think where it started to lose me is there are a few too many places where it really tries to draw out the tension over details that either we know the history and we know the outcome already, or you don't know the history and this decision has no meaning to you. Like, first of all, there's lots of scenes of various people taking turns reading details from these reports that I'm just feeling like, okay, either you have studied this history and you know this stuff already, or you haven't, and that sentence meant you have no idea what that means. Like, oh, it turns out that McNamara actually knew about blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, okay, well, so either we know that or you don't know what they're just talking about. And then moments where it's like, oh, we have to really draw out the tension. What decision are they going to make? What decision are they going to make? What? We don't know. We don't know in the movie. And I'm just sitting here going like, well, yeah, yes, we do. We know that. I mean, we're watching a movie of this happening. If they say no right here, then the story's over. We know what's going to happen, and the movie's trying to draw out the suspense of something that seems like a foregone conclusion.
Yeah, and see, this is, I think, where we started to see the movie differently. And I saw those moments as character studies more than the actual drama, because I started to watch the movie more as to how did this, woman whose father started the Post or owned the Post, left it to her husband who died, and she sort of became the accidental leader when she was really just a, liked being a high society person. That's why she had, these people are all her friends, because she liked being a Washington insider socialite. And then she has to become the boss and make these very tough decisions. So I saw those decisions as not like the suspense of like what's going to happen, but the development of her character as going from just, again, being the accidental boss to the actual boss. And that's where the suspense was, is like watching her own those moments and make those decisions, even though everybody was treating her like she didn't matter at the beginning. She was sort of like an aside in the boardroom, and now she's telling them what they're going to be doing with her newspaper. That's what I saw the tension as, and that's what I enjoyed about it.
Well, I will definitely say that Meryl Streep's character and her arc is the stuff that I enjoyed the most in the movie. She's very good. She's nominated. She is the second nomination other than Best Pictures, her as Best Actress, and she's very good. And I'll agree that a lot of her stuff, like, I like that development, especially given, like the stuff early on of showing her actually rehearsing with Fritz, her advisor, what she's going to say at this board meeting. But then when she's actually in the meeting, she's unfortunately kind of too intimidated, and he ends up having to say it for her. And we can see the humiliation on her face of feeling like, I should have been able to just say that, but now I've had to have a man say it for me while I sit right here in front of all these people, and they know, they can tell that I'm intimidated, and they think less of me for it. And we can see that. And so having her grow from that to where she is able to stand up even to the people who are trying to soft settle her on, well, look, I'm just looking out for you, and have her make those decisions. So like those decisions, a lot of those, I agree. Those were not so much the ones I was thinking of. Like one of the ones that I thought felt like it went on a really long time is when we had the legal counsel questioning Bob Odenkirk's character about your source. Was your source the New York Times? Was it the same guy as the New York Times? And that scene felt like it lasted 5 times too long to me. Because it was just that sort of, I feel like that whole scene could have been Who is your source? Well, I don't reveal sources. Well, buddy, if your source was the same source as the New York Times, then we could be in contempt of court. Cut to. Like that, the whole scene could have been those 2 lines.
Okay, so again, here's where I feel like I watched the movie differently than you, and it doesn't make it neither of it right or wrong. Is where the way I saw that was not to try to drag out the tension of the decision, but to give us some context of like how much everybody was working against this happening. Mm-hmm. Even their own legal counsel was like fighting with them to the point where they had to argue it out for this extended period of time. Like, mm-hmm. That's how much this almost didn't happen, and why we should be so happy that like these people stuck true to their principles, even though we know that they did. Mm-hmm. So that's where I saw that. And so I thought that scene was important to give the context to me that this was so difficult. Yes, but you're right.
But the story you could have communicated that same element without having him have to ask literally the same question 5 times and get no, 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 yes, well, maybe, yes, likely.
Yeah. See, I just took it as that's how combative they were, and that if it had just been like, hey, this is what the problem is, yes, factually that would have moved the story along and we would have known that it was important. I felt it gave more texture to it, that he was like fighting him on it. So, but that's, again, it's neither is right or wrong. It's just how I saw it. You know?
Yeah. I just felt like there was a lot of that stuff that it just felt kind of, it needed an editor. It needed it like at a storytelling level, not so much cinematic as much as like, there was just lots of sequences where it felt like we just repeated the same kind of points or lines over and over again without really advancing anything.
Right. I see where
and while Meryl Streep had this huge arc, like Tom Hanks's character's arc was kind of this big personal realization that he did maybe let Jack Kennedy off easy, because this recognition of, wait, I thought he was my friend, but maybe he really only wanted me to think I was his friend, because then I wouldn't say mean things about him in the paper.
Or maybe just people are more complex.
Yeah. And so that's a big realization. But ultimately, it leaves him on the same side of the argument that he was already on.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think.
So
I
again, it's like I agree that
Meryl Streep's part is the most important. I think that is it.
You kind of broke up there.
Came out.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and again, I don't want to overstate the criticisms either. The movie is fine. It's good. I enjoyed it. There's some interesting things to think about in it. Meryl Streep's very good. I just kind of felt like most of the rest of it felt sort of, I don't know, not phoned in. That's overstating it too, but just like not special.
Wasn't the best work was probably a good way to describe it, So,
yep. Whereas just as a comparison, obviously it's a very different movie. But before the movie, I saw a trailer for Spielberg's Ready Player One. Yeah. And I'm looking at that, and obviously it's special effects laden. It's a very different story. But I'm watching that, and I'm just saying, like that is doing interesting visual things, and like that feels like trying to actually tell a story. This one felt more like, well, yeah, I mean, I guess maybe then we have a scene with, them going over to they could send a page over to the New York Times or something. That's kind of what it felt more like to me, as opposed to saying, but then he gets into the DeLorean and he's driving up the ramp. You see what I mean?
Yep.
That's kind of, yeah. But so it's fine. I don't want to tell anybody not to like it. I liked it. I just didn't like it as much as the others on the best picture list.
And I'm okay with it being there, but not passionately.
Well, I think that's one of the things I said in the message last night too, is that it's like, I liked it. I could definitely imagine people liking it even more than I did, but it's hard for me to imagine anyone coming out of that movie and going, "Oh, I loved it. I am a total The Post booster." Someone enthusiastically singing its praises. That I feel like I don't see that. But anyway, by contrast,
Well,
next movie.
I just got notified that my dinner was ready.
Oh,
So,
well,
I know this is going to be I can't hold it off past this because this will be a long conversation, I think, for The Shape of Water. So I think we should lead with that next time.
All right. Well, let me at least just say then, by contrast, a movie that I will enthusiastically sing the praises of is The Shape of Water. But with that one, I will certainly do it while acknowledging that it's probably not for everybody.
Agreed. I was pleasantly surprised by it. But yeah, I think that'll be a good lead off to our next discussion.
Okay, great. So we have more movies to see, more movies to discuss. So in the meantime, everybody, watch good movies.
Yes.
All right. Good night, everybody.